G'day everybody and welcome to this week's edition of Q&A. We are a university church on a university campus, so we like to ask questions so that we can get answers. And this week's question is, who are the four horsemen of the apocalypse? So the four horsemen of the apocalypse are described in chapter 6 of the book of Revelations in verses 1 through 8. And the most common interpretation of these verses is that the horsemen represent events that will happen at the end of the world. So the first horseman is described in chapter 6, verse 2 of Revelation, and it says, "I looked, and there before me was a white horse. Its rider held a bow, and he was given a crown, and he rode out as a conqueror bent on conquest." A lot of people view this as the Antichrist coming to deceive people. Jesus is said to come back on a white horse, and so this figure does as well. So it would stand to reason that he's possibly trying to deceive people into thinking that he is in fact the second coming of Jesus. The second horseman is described in chapter 6, verse 4 of Revelation, and it says this, "Then another horse came out, a fiery red one. And its rider was given the power to take peace from the earth and make men slay each other. To him was given a large sword." This one is most commonly interpreted as a great war that's going to break out over the face of the earth at that time. The third rider is described in Revelation chapter 6, verse 5, and it says this, "And there before me was a black horse. Its rider was holding a pair of scales in its hand. Then I heard what sounded like a voice among the four living creatures saying, 'A quart of wheat for a day's wages, and 3 quarts of barley for a day's wages. And do not damage the oil and the wine.'" This one is interpreted most often as a great famine that will come, probably as a result of the first 2 horsemen. And the last delightful rider is described in Revelation chapter 6, verse 8, and it says this, "I looked, and there before me was a pale horse. Its rider was named Death, and Hades was following close behind him. They were given power over 1/4 of the earth to kill by sword, famine, and plague, and by the wild beasts of the earth." The fourth horseman is interpreted to be symbolic of death and destruction, and lots of people think it is a culmination of the previous 3, along with plagues and diseases and things like that. So what do all these things mean? Basically, Revelations is a book that is apocalyptic language describing what's going to happen at the end of the world. There's going to be a process by which God removes this world, removes sin, removes death, removes all the wrong things there's ever been. And Revelations is most commonly interpreted as a description or a forecast of what those things are going to be like. You could probably tell that sin and death and Satan aren't going to give up without a fight, and so that's what we see here. As Christians, we know that we win. Jesus has already won. And so for us, we don't need to worry about these types of images or language or anything like that because it doesn't apply to us. So that was this week's pretty crazy question. If you have a question, make sure you send it in via the Facebook or the number on the screen or YouTube comments, whatever you want. And we'll see you next week. Bye.